So it's just gone 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, do you remember during the pandemic when we were all urged to stay at home, save lives? I mean, cast your mind back to this.
So we are saying, don't go to work, go to work. Don't take public transport, go to work, don't go to work. Stay indoors. If you can work from home, go to work. Don't go to work. Go outside, don't go outside. And then we will or won't do something or other.
Sorry, wrong one.
We said that you should work from home if you can and only go to work if you must. We now need to stress that anyone who can't work from home, for instance, those in construction or manufacturing, should be actively encouraged to go to work, and we want it to be safe for you to get to work.
I prefer Matt Lucas's version. I mean, the message basically was stay at home, which most of us dutifully did, and those who were employed and couldn't go to work stayed at home and were paid to do so at the taxpayer's expense. Furlough, remember that. Public transport, so buses, tubes and trains, ran a skeleton service, whilst other public services like nurses and doctors, in fact most of the NHS, teachers and police worked flat out. And as we stumbled out of the pandemic in March this year, after coming through a winter of train disruption caused by COVID, nobody really wanted to go back to the office. But those who did were met by tube strikes. That's when the news came that rail fares in England and Wales were to rise by 3.8%, the biggest leap in almost a decade to recoup the cost of the pandemic. Now, Frances O'Grady, the Trade Union and Congress and General Manager, she said, at a time when pay is being eclipsed by the rising cost of living, the last thing that commuters need is more expensive rail fares. She then went on to say, it is vital that our rail system recovers the passengers it lost at the start of the pandemic, especially if we want to keep our climate commuters. Another rise in rail fares will hit commuters and make it harder for city centres to bounce back. Well, you know what I'm saying. Obviously, I didn't read it properly, but you can read it yourselves. But back then, they cared. Fast forward a few months later, and they're at it again. This time, the RMT, the Union for Rail, Maritime and Transport, that represents many railway workers, a third of whom earn over 50 grand per year, they're planning a series of strikes over pay. Despite the fact that we are in a huge cost of living crisis, as Frances so politely pointed out, and that numbers taking public transport are dwindling, and that 70% of these rail workers earn above the average wage, and despite the fact that taxpayers bailed out the railways to the tune of £16 billion, a series of one-day strikes have been planned, including days either side of the Glastonbury weekend. Guess what they're asking? For more money. I want to laugh out loud. So let's see how much they actually earn. Well, the latest figures from the Department of Transport show that the average railway worker earns £44,000. That is 70% above the national average of £26,000. Let's compare this to the average wage of nurses at £31,000. That's what nurses earn. Teachers, they earn an average of £37,000. And care workers, a measly £17,000. And the police, who couldn't strike, are not allowed to strike, they earn an average of £42,000. All of whom worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic, their taxes contributing to the burden that is now furlough, the very thing that supported many transport workers who are now planning to strike. Now, Union Chief Mike Lynch said, railway workers have been treated appallingly, and despite our best efforts and negotiations, the rail industry, with the support of the government, has failed to take their concerns seriously. She went on to say, we have a cost of living crisis and it is unacceptable for railway workers to either lose their jobs or face another year of a pay freeze when inflation is at 11.1% and rising. Our union will now embark on a sustained campaign of industrial action which will shut down the railway system. Great. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps accused the RMT of jumping the gun. It's more like trying to pull off a great train robbery, but if they're not careful, they'll run out of track.